Test. All right, today is Wednesday, March 1st. It is 7 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled town council meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
All right, next item is roll call. Tody, do you mind taking the roll, please?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
Here.
Chairman Anderson.
Here.
All present, thank you.
Thank you. Next item is general public comment. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on anything not on the agenda this evening? We'll see if, is there anyone online? If there is, if you would raise your hand. Seeing nobody online. All right, with that, I am closing general public comment. Next item is item number 5, minutes, February 15th, 2023 town council meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Item number 6 is adjustments to the agenda. I don't have any. Is there any adjustments to the agenda tonight? I'm seeing no. Item 7 is items to be signed to treasurer's warrant. I signed those right before the meeting and I put them on your desk, Tody. Item 8, town manager's report. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first item, I'd like to refer the matter just for a quick update on the marijuana working group, and Liam Gallagher is heading that up. So if you'll allow me, I'll just have Liam give you a quick update there and I'll proceed.
Thank you, Tom. So this was a concept that was a staff recommendation, was supported by ordinance committee to have some hopefully productive dialogue and collaboration with a group made up of residents, industry folks, as well as town staff to see if we can come with some thoughtful solutions to some of the challenges we've encountered with the marijuana, specifically cultivation, but may expand beyond that. So we have our first 2 meetings set. And we expect to work during the moratorium period to bring back some ideas and concepts to council for incorporation into the ordinance.
Good, thank you, Liam. On to my matters of business, I suppose. I did advise the council earlier today, and there was an article in the Press Herald, so perhaps some residents are aware. Apparently, the Scarborough Sanitary District has imposed, as far as I understand, a moratorium. I'm not exactly sure of the particulars and the details, as I've not seen it in writing. But I did receive a call from the superintendent just about 8 o'clock this morning, advising that under apparently he has the authority to impose such a moratorium. I did ask for the details in writing just so we could appreciate the scope, the breadth, and frankly the duration as well of the moratorium, so we can assess what that means and we can advise residents and ourselves appropriately. As of this moment, I have not received any of the written materials, so I'm really not in a position to comment, I guess, in too much detail about it. I will say that it's my understanding the rationale that really gives rise to this. It's not an issue related to capacity, so it's not as if we can convey through our systems and pump stations or the treatment plant. It's really an issue related to disposal of the sludge. And the matter really dates back to about 18 months ago with the PFAS revelations, which are very serious and appropriately so. The decades old use of land spreading sludge from municipal solid waste treatment plant or municipal wastewater treatment plants was disallowed, and I suspect it will never come back, frankly, for obvious and good reasons. So the option that all treatment facilities turned to was to landfill the items, which is a permissible approach. It did have additional costs, which I think were reported on at the time. But then more recently, the landfill operator said we cannot continue to accept the sludge. And that, interestingly enough, has as much to do with the legislative action that either prohibited altogether or severely limited the amount of out-of-state construction demolition debris that has been coming into Maine for decades, I believe. And what's important about that for the landfill operators is that they need to properly manage the waste stream. They need some quantities of dry materials with these so-called wet materials to be able to properly manage that, the overall material. So this does appear to be a bit of a crisis, and Scarborough Sanitary District is not alone, kind of caught in this this crunch, if you will. I suspect there's a lot of discussions happening at the state level, so I'm hopeful that there can be some fairly quick attention to the matter. I am aware the district trustees will have a meeting in this building tomorrow night at 6:30. I believe this matter will be on their agenda. I intend to be at that meeting. It seems a bit surprising to me that the superintendent alone has the authority to impose a moratorium that has the potential for very widespread and deep implications. So at the very least, if that's true, I would hope the trustees will spend some time in their public meeting to have conversation, discourse around that matter. So I do intend to attend. I will note, though, the inn is fairly full tomorrow night. We have a school board meeting, their normal meeting in these chambers. The Council Corner Live will be held at the classroom across the parking lot. So the sanitary meeting will be in my conference room, which I wonder how that's going to accommodate even a small meeting, much less one that I expect will have some attendance. So stay tuned, but I'll report as I learn more. Fair enough. So yeah, we've got a busy late afternoon, early evening for sure. With regard to Comfort Inn, I guess I'll express my disappointment. The owners and their representatives have been, I won't say totally unresponsive, but really not very helpful in recent weeks in terms of my requesting updates. Staff did take it upon themselves to go down and speak to the personnel that work the front desk and have confirmed that 29 rooms continue to be occupied. That's about the same number as the last official report they provided to me, which I'm certainly not pleased with. I think there was a clear understanding, at least in my mind, and expectation that there would be guests into mid-February, maybe into late February. Here we are, March 1st, and I haven't seen much movement for the last 30 days. So we do need to, I guess, strengthen our resolve to really understand what's going on and have them execute the final piece in terms of transitioning back to traditional hotel use. I will say during in the meantime, the calls for service I'll characterize as manageable for both January and February. They were 26 and 27 calls respectively. And the nature of the calls is much, much different than we saw early on. So, they're not at this point, I would say, overtaxing our public safety systems. And they've almost totally, there's almost no EMS calls at all at this point. It's really all police related, if you will. And most of them are administrative by my review. So I'll redouble my efforts to really understand what the final timeline is to complete that transition plan. And then quickly from housekeeping perspective, I did advise 2 weeks ago, I think all of us probably received our tax bills in the mail about 2 weeks ago. Just a reminder that those second half taxes are due March 15th. And I can always get a sense of when that deadline is approaching as the activity in the revenue office does pick up considerably. But just a reminder there. And then just interesting little side note, I think 2 meetings ago, this council authorized the Public Works Director to post certain local roads. Given the fact that there was really no frost in the ground, there'll be no posting necessary this year. That's the first time in my 30-year career. I think we've never had to post a road. I don't know if that's an indicator of climate change or what's going on, but just interesting side note that no need for road posting this year. And then finally, if I beg your indulgence, I'd like to spend the balance of my time providing an overview of staff updates as regards the council's goals. And I have agreed to a goal for myself in coordination with council leadership to provide monthly written reports. And at your place, there is a written report. Forgive me, it's still a work in progress, but I think it serves the purpose, at least in the first instance. For purposes of tonight, I just have a quick little PowerPoint that paraphrases and summarizes what's in that written report. So if I can just have your attention for about 10 minutes, we can work through this, and I'm pleased to respond to questions after. So Liam, let's just move quickly through. So you'll see this PowerPoint is organized in line with the goals that the council's established for itself. So the first one was around financial management. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. These are just restating the goals that you passed. Next. Each of these goals, or most of them anyway, have subparts, if you will, in a little more detail. So with respect to this one, really around budget, there's some very particular guidance. My simple update is that we're right in the throes of budget. We're in the full development process. And so this time, in my next report, we'll be able to report at least how we start the budget conversation as regards these goals. Next. In addition, there's a requirement or expectation of providing quarterly financial reports to the council. And as in this regard, we do expect to have a very detailed discussion regarding fund balance at our next finance committee meeting. That's next Wednesday, March 8th. And then we expect to share much of that same information at the council meeting on the 15th. And we do expect to provide initial quarterly reports starting at that point as well. The final piece regarding financial management involves review of financial fiscal policy. Just to be very blunt about this, our new finance director is really focusing on other matters that need immediate attention, like completing the audit and getting budget out the door. Quite honestly, this will likely be a summer into fall exercise as soon as he has time to really spend some time with that document. And so far, I expect Norm will have some very good insight and recommendations to improve that document. The second goal around housing choice and homelessness. There are a couple of subcategories. The first one was providing public safety with the necessary resources to conduct to really understand homelessness and what it means in terms of social service needs and overall community needs. I do intend to come forward with a budget request for an additional staff member in that social service department, if you will, that's aligned with the police department. We expect that this person will also be our GA administrator, which is a position that is of increasing importance to us, given the volume of need that we've experienced over the last 24 months or so. And we think that's a really good alignment. A lot of the folks that we'll be dealing with through GA will likely, not likely, but may very well need services beyond as well. The second piece of that is baseline and target percentages regarding workforce and affordable housing. This is a conversation that the Housing Alliance has started. They were an active participant, as were many committees in the GMO discussion, if you will. And I believe it's my understanding that the chairman of the Housing Alliance intends to be part of the council corner live session tomorrow and relate some of the comments regarding the proposal directed to the council at that time. And then also, I believe Councilor Caterina may have spoken to most of you. The Housing Alliance at the last meeting did hear a presentation from GPCOG representatives regarding the Safe in Maine program. This is seeking municipal financial support to help offset costs related to creation of permanent, it's going to sound funny, permanent temporary housing. And I believe they did take action. There will be a recommendation coming for your consideration in that regard. Next, please. The third goal is around residential growth management. First one really just states the obvious, and that there's a process that's currently underway and nearing the finish line, presumably, regarding revisions to the growth management ordinance. Myself, the planning director, Karen Martin, continue to support that effort and pleased to do so as we go forward. This week will be important, just getting additional input tomorrow night. And then we're making arrangements for another feedback loop with the developer community now that there's a discrete proposal that's out there. Secondarily, the revising zoning ordinance to better align with future growth. And we do have a scheduled workshop in April on this matter. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. So this is LD 2003, and there is a workshop. Again, our planning director is scheduled to provide that in April. Myself and Autumn, and I'm not sure if any members of council, I didn't make the council chair and Councilor McGee aware. GPCOG has an online roundtable regarding this matter. It's scheduled for March 9th. I can resend that invite if you're interested. Just we can surround ourselves with as much information as possible. Further on, related to residential growth management, there was a lot of emphasis around impact fees, and work is underway. I guess I'm foreshadowing a bit, but one of the goals I've agreed to is to provide a plan of sorts that will kind of lay out steps and timeline, if you will, to implement a new regime of impact fees. This does take some time, and Council Chair suggested, and I think it's a very good idea, that we hold a workshop sooner than later to really provide some of the statutory backdrop, historical relevance of what fees we've had historically and where we might be able to look to in the future. We don't have a date for that, but I'd like to do it in April sometime if possible. But as a preview to what I expect that plan will be, just to kind of start setting expectations, we do anticipate being able to make some movements, certainly in this calendar year, some things as soon as late spring, early summer. There's an opportunity to consider a recreation impact fee, and a matter on your agenda this evening regarding the master parks plan really serves as a great backdrop and rationale in support of such a fee. We also do believe we have some near-term opportunities for new traffic impact fees, namely at the intersection of Ginn Road and Payne Road. And that's really enabled by the fact that there's a party that will be providing a full design and cost estimate, which we can use as the basis and rationale for our fee. And another one we think we can advance sooner than later relates to expanding the bridge deck. This is the Nonsuch River crossing on Payne Road, which is a limiting factor on that segment of roadway. Well, we do have phase 3 of Gorham Road, and there's a similar challenge with the crossing at Gorham Road. So I added that. I'm not sure.
Oh, right.
Two different bridges,
Yes, gotcha.
crossings, if you will.
Thank you.
The difference, Payne Road, I think we would be looking to actually increase travel capacity, maybe a lane or 2 lanes. If you can appreciate, on either side of that bridge, there are additional lanes. And so it's not inconceivable that in the future we'll need a consistent segment through that stretch. And that is a limiting factor at this point. And as regards Gorham Road, there's a phase 3 of our road reconstruction project. That road may be different and may not be a good candidate for this, in that I think we need to provide for pedestrian safety, but I don't know that we need to increase vehicular volumes through that area. So stay tuned. And then the Transportation Committee and staff are working through the townwide transportation study. And that's a document that I think we need to have more conversation around. I know Councilor McGee was part of a conversation last evening on the matter. We expect that plan, because of its scope and frankly budget, will be good indicators of where else to look. But we don't expect that it will necessarily produce the level of detail that involves at least preliminary design and cost estimates to be able to support impact fees. But we think it's going to certainly suggest the next phase to look at, if you will. And at least for conversation point, we do have a proposal in the budget that you'll see and consider that will kind of pick up where that leaves off and spend some detailed time and attention at those.
Councilor Cucci has a question, I think.
Yes.
School impact fees, are those still on the radar?
Yes, I beg your pardon. It's just an oversight. I think we have a very good opportunity where we have a tangible project, which, and presumably a pretty accurate estimate, where we will within months. And so, yes, of course, it was an oversight on my part, but yes, that's something we think we can advance this year as well. Thank you. And the last thing I'll just mention, one of the areas the council kind of gave a nod to is whether or not there's anything in the area of kind of environmental impact fees. And that's an area that the statute is fairly silent on. I'm not to a point where I say that we can't, but I would note that for Red Brook, we already have what's akin to an impact fee. There are fees that are paid into development that happens within that watershed. And that's a model that we might look to for other urban impaired streams in town, like Phillips Brook and possibly Millbrook. So I think there's perhaps another way to get to that. It may not be officially an impact fee, but I think there's another way to have development that occurs within those watersheds to be responsible for some portion of the correction. Number 4, strategic capital and facilities planning. Perhaps councilors will recall, I believe we had a budget proposal in the FY23 budget that failed to ultimately be funded, but we do acknowledge that we really need a professional kind of assessment of our facilities to help us prioritize and identify future investments. So we'll be coming back with a request that I'm sure the Finance Committee and the full council will give some consideration to, we hope. The second one is really speaks to the ad hoc committee for the community center. Staff has put together a draft. The appointments and negotiation committee received it at their last meeting. I expect they'll start to have some substantive review and discussion at their future meeting next week, as soon as next week, perhaps. So I think that seems well underway. And the final piece to this goal regards land acquisition for municipal and school purposes. Myself and council leadership are very actively involved in specific negotiations with a particular landowner. At the same time, I'm pursuing a couple of other potential opportunities that we believe are worth pursuing to understand, to appreciate whether they're viable and should be similarly pursued. So I think we're fully engaged in that process, and I think we all appreciate that this is a high priority, just given the timeline that is in front of us. So we'll continue to focus on that. And at some point, I expect we'll be requesting an executive session to provide the council kind of the detailed update of where all of that stands. The 5th goal relates to sustainability, conservation, and climate change. The first goal really has to do a lot with the Conservation Commission, really a number of advisory committees and the Land Trust to partnering, particularly around defining for Scarborough, what does it mean, this 30 for 30 goal? That's 30% of conservation land by 2030. And I believe Conservation Commission has already begun this conversation and started down that road. And I expect that they can report out in the next few months on that goal, and staff will continue to support them. Again, in the 2024 budget, we do have a couple of studies that we'd like to bring forward. One is a vulnerability assessment. That's really around the issues of climate change and understanding where are we vulnerable and where should we be focusing. And the other one is an open space conservation plan. And so again, we hope that these will have some robust conversation and consideration as part of the budget deliberation. A further sub-goal in this category really relates to integrating the Conservation Commission and Sustainability Committee into the town's planning process as a matter of routine. I know planning staff has already met almost immediately upon you adopting these goals back in early January with the Conservation Commission. There are currently 2 areas where they already have review authority and responsibility, and those in the areas of plan developments during the master plan phase of that process, and also in the context of transfer of development rights. So those exist today. I think they've not been consistently used. And so I think they're top of mind now for everyone involved. And really to ensure that the Conservation Commission will be consistently involved, they've been formally integrated into our longstanding development review team. This is an interdisciplinary department review team involving engineering, public works, public safety, planning, and now Conservation Commission. And this looks at projects as they come in, and it's an opportunity to make sure that staff comments, and in this case, committee comments, are provided to the planning board for their consideration as they consider different applications. Conservation Commission is also doing some work on a bit of a revelation. Apparently in our approved plant list, there are some invasive species that are in that list, and the Conservation Commission has been asked to review that list and provide some recommendations for updates. And lastly, the engineering department is looking to collaborate with these committees regarding an update to our post-construction stormwater ordinance and the creation of a new erosion and sediment control ordinance. So there's a lot of good work underway, and that's really a combined effort between Autumn, Angela Blanchette, and Jamie Fitch at this point. 6, looking at traffic and transportation. I made earlier reference to this. This is about partnering with the Transportation Committee regarding this townwide transportation plan. I'm aware, I believe the Transportation Committee met last evening, met with the traffic consultants for the purpose of really defining the scope of that project. And I think there was some good discussion, good work, and perhaps Councilor McGee can report in more detail as he was part of that process. We expect that process will take us most of this year and be a final report sometime early in 24 at this point. And then continued support and involvement in the Gorham Connector. The planning director is part of a standing monthly meeting, and for my part, I'm actively involved on at least a monthly basis as well. So I think we've got a very good involvement and pulse of that project. And last is public engagement and communications. The 3 sub parts of that. Council Corner Live, that's really a council initiative. Staff has been and will continue to be a support in that endeavor. This next one, council outreach, I'm not sure. I'm pleased to help support you, but I guess I need some ideas how we can do that. So don't hesitate to ask. And I do have expectations of putting in funding for, I'll call it an update to the community survey. I think we can do it far cheaper than we did initially if we use the same consultant, and but that's to be discussed further. But I do expect to include that in the budget as well. So that's a quick overview, and again, this is a work in progress. So if it's a little clunky, I apologize, but we'll try to fine tune it going forward. So it's not a huge task on me, and it's not a big time commitment in the public meetings either.
So you're telling us it's been quiet. Is that, you know?
Well, one of my fears is that, there'll be months where there's not much to report.
Yeah.
So, I'm really pleased with what staff's been able to do really in the first 45 days since you set goals. So things are launched, and it's going to take some time. Again, there'll be times where there's not much to report month to month. So just be prepared for that. But there's a lot of stuff in motion, and I feel good that we've started things, I think, in the right direction, and I expect we'll see them through the end.
No, I think it's been remarkable, all the work that's been done in the first 45 days. So thank you, Tom, and to the staff and to the counselors for moving these forward. So it's great to see progress in such a short time period. So thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Counselor McGee?
Thanks. I have, it's actually going back to previous to the presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So on the Comfort Inn side, we had given you authority to issue fines. Do you see yourself taking those steps to help encourage and have stronger communication or compliance?
Yes, I think we're to the point if we're not getting cooperation and really even response to my inquiries, I don't see an alternative at this point. I have avoided that, trying to work toward cooperatively toward that transition plan, and for the longest time there was good progress. We need something to change the equation at this point.
Sure, thanks. I was just curious. And then I know you're still waiting for some information, but I believe this is going back to the sludge issue. I thought I read in the paper, and whether the paper got it accurately or not is, anyone's guess, but I thought they also said they were stopping any type of development for private septic systems as well.
Yes.
And that was based on the fact that those private companies still have to dispose of their sludge in one manner or another. I guess my question would be, what authority would the sanitary district have over those private companies and private septic systems? Because from what my understanding is, the sanitary district's having problems storing while they wait for a pickup.
Mhm.
Who's to say that the private company picking up in a private septic system has that same storage issue.
Well, just appreciate it. I think you're referring to the case, and I have an on-lot system at my house. So every 2 or 3 years, I have a private service come and
Sure.
pump out my holding tank. All that material needs to go to a licensed wastewater treatment facility to be processed as though it came in a pipe. if you
So
will.
they're using sanitary
Yeah.
districts.
Yes.
Services, even though they're a private company.
They are, and
Okay,
I don't
that
believe.
helps clarify.
I don't believe legally they must bring that to the Scarborough district. You know, there's a fee structure. They might shop the fees around, if you will.
Mhm.
So I think that potentially could have some huge implications because a fair amount of this town does rely on private septic systems. And, you know, most of those systems, you know, need to be serviced on a regular interval, but, you know, stretching it a couple of months or a couple of years probably isn't terrible, and it could be done. But in the event of house sales, I was talking to Councilor Caterina this morning, many times in a house sale, it's not uncommon to insist that the holding tank is pumped as part of the
Mhm.
transaction. So I think there could be some widespread implications.
I'd be curious too, if maybe you could bark up this tree during your conversations with them, is where their authority is though to stop that private portion of it. Whether or not that private company is putting their sludge somewhere else or their waste somewhere else. How does that stop anyone in Scarborough from servicing their own private septic
Well, I
systems
think- I
or
think-
bringing them online?
I think the difference is the wastewater that makes its way to the treatment plant via their conveyance system through their pipes. They can't turn that off. It's coming. Whereas this material, they can say, no, we will no longer accept this material from private.
Mhm.
And again, I suspect there's other alternatives that those services could look to, other treatment plants. But it does seem like this crisis is affecting everyone. It's not unique to Scarborough.
Sure.
Uh,
I was just less curious about the authority behind that. I mean, I could see maybe our municipality taking some action on the private side. I just didn't know where the sanitary district authority lied, but again, if
Yeah.
you could just look into it a little.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious on their legal authority to impose moratoriums. They are a legal quasi-municipal entity as an authority. I'm not familiar with Maine law in that regard. You know, and so I've got all sorts of questions. I know what a moratorium means in the context of the municipal world.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to hazard a guess whether that's the same, it applies the same, frankly. So I've got a lot of questions, want to learn more. And again, I'm hopeful that there'll be a fairly quick resolution to this.
Any other questions, Councilor?
One observation, and I'm please don't take this as I'm questioning your judgment. I was just curious on this. You said that you were going to add a GA administrator role, but it was with public safety. Would that report into the chief of police? I mean, I guess if you're going to have a GA administrator, who's that person reporting to? Because it sounds like you're kind of coupling that workload with the support services offered by the police department.
Yeah, I mean, Liam's
Food for thought.
looks like he wants to speak. You raise a point that certainly staff has thought about. The social service navigator has been aligned with the police department. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We see there's some opportunity to further augment and support that work. And from a budgetary point of view, we're already paying part-time services for GA administrators. So we see a way to kind of make this transition and trade up and frankly get full-time staff attending to those needs. I appreciate your point, the alignment with the police department. Liam, do you have anything further to add?
No, we had the same, we will continue to have the same kind of question or deliberation. The social service navigator, who I think everyone's familiar with at this point in the work that she does in the community, really was intended to have a dual focus. The overwhelming majority of her time and attention is external, but she does have an internal component around some public safety, mental health components. And so that's why it was constructed in the public safety department. But the external work, there's a lot of overlap and collaboration with general assistance. And so it seems kind of funky on its face, but I think that we have confidence that the individuals in the mix won't have any issues with the optics and challenges. We certainly, the one thing that we will be sensitive to is we don't want general assistants to have to go to the police department to get services. So we'll be cognizant of that as we move forward with this model if we get there.
Just a final point, the social service navigator is aligned with the police department really due to the fact that many times it's our police officers that are aware that there's a need. And what consistently what they found is they would respond to a call, encounter a situation that wasn't really police related, but someone really needed some help and it wasn't going away. And they called off to another call and there was no kind of follow-up. There's just no opportunity. And so I think embedding that person in the police department gave direct line of passing off that information and making sure someone followed up. And I think that makes a lot of sense still. So we're sensitive to the points you raised.
All right, I think that was it for me right now. Thank you.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, just an update. Well, it's not update yet. I did put a call into Kate Dufour. She's the lobbyist for Maine Municipal and knows what's going on with the state regarding this whole sewer situation and the sludge and what's going on. I have not heard back from her yet, but I'll let you know when she gets back to me, because it is part of a bigger picture that's going on politically right now in Augusta too. So there's all these parties, you know, and now they're playing hardball. So just so you'll know. The other thing, I think it's great to have the GA person involved, because it is part of the community policing model, which Scarborough was really one of the first police departments in the state and probably even in the area to really get in on the community policing. So I'm comfortable with that. But anyway, it's something to, I know, to think about. I'm happy that we'd be bringing someone else on. Because GA is changing too. There's some things going on in Augusta with GA that's gonna be. So.
Counselor Hamel, did you have a
I
question?
just had one quick question for Tom, and first of all, comment, thanks for the update. It's clear that a lot of this stuff is going to take some staging and some foundational work, to get rolling, but that's a great initial update. So thanks for that. I did have a question though, however, and this is somewhat analogous, I think, to the questions we've had about fund balances. When will we actually see some numbers on fund balance and as well as impact fees? I know we keep talking about working on, how we're going to calculate them and how we're going to, assess new ones, but do you have an idea of when we might be able to see some numbers in both of those?
Fund balance, I expect it will be a detailed discussion with numbers shared and so on and so forth at finance next week. And,
Okay.
and again, before this body on March 15th.
Great.
As regards impact fees, as I said earlier, I think there are 2 or 3 of them that we could probably advance in the next 3 to 5 months, because we'll have the requisite rationale and justification to support them. The other ones will take much longer. We need to be able, and the state law requires it, and that's why I think a workshop on the subject I think will be helpful. These numbers can't be fictitious. They need to be supported in fact, and they really need to be based on a particular project and a cost estimate, and those don't happen overnight.
So one follow-up question to that though, my assumption was that we have been collecting impact fees. So obviously we've used some basis to collect them, and I'm assuming that we have a balance somewhere in our budget. So it'd be good to know what that is. And even if we have to look back and revise the formula or update it, still would be good to get.
Oh, sure. I beg your pardon. We can certainly provide an update regarding the existing impact fees, some of which are 30 years old. So, but nonetheless, there was a rationale at the time, and that's been supported and consistent throughout. And we do have balances. A number of them we do intend to phase out in partnership with the traffic movement permit and the Downs and state of Maine, frankly. But we certainly can provide an update with the current fees and the balances that exist in those accounts.
Thanks. Baseline would be helpful starting point.
Okay.
Thanks.
So just to follow up on that, I think you had mentioned doing an impact fee workshop where we would cover a lot of that. So I think trying to get that in April, I think we have wiggle room for that. So that would be a good potential timeline, but also when we do the financial review, again, when we talked about like specific things, like I think for the council, we're going to have our first quarterly review at the 3/15 meeting. So I guess 2 weeks from now, again, similar to Tom's report, it's going to be the starting point. So if there are ideas or things like specific things that we want to see going forward, like show us the balance of impact fees, on a quarterly basis. Like we can work with Tom to add those in if those are important metrics that we want to see and understand on a quarterly basis.
That's an excellent point. We're pleased to provide the sort of information that you're interested in, but it'll be very helpful if you give us some ideas in that regard so we can be responsive.
Any other questions? Counselor Fucci?
So I just had one, I thought that was a great update, by the way. The only question I had was related to the audit. So you have a planned presentation date for the budget. You have a planned delivery date for the audit.
I don't have a date specific, but at this point, it's trending to be the end of March. I mean, it has to be by law.
So before the budget. Okay. That's what I was trying
They're
to
going to be,
validate.
they're going to be very close, but yes.
All right, any other questions for Tom? No? All right. Next item is order number 23-01, 7 o'clock public hearing and action on the following requests for a new food handler's license from Cindy Bell and Todd Gregory, The Main Lab LLC located at 71 Pleasant Hill Road, Hannaford Supermarket and Pharmacy, number 8451, located at 417 Payne Road, and Eben Musich, Alpine Cannabis Company, located at 15 Holly Street, number 205B. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on any of these items? Or anybody online? All right, I'm seeing nobody online and nobody in the room, so I'm closing public comment. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, I'm seeing no discussion. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, next up is order number 23-014, second reading on the proposed amendments to chapter 601, the Town of Scarborough Transportation Ordinance, section 25, parking restrictions, one-way streets and alleys, one-way streets. And this is the second reading brought to us from the planning department. I don't know, Tom, if there's anything you want to set up, or Autumn. I think
Adam's
we've
here. I suspect everyone's fairly well versed in this subject matter, so we're pleased to answer questions, but I have nothing further to add.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? No? All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I am seeing no discussion. All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Next up is order number 23-015, second reading on the proposed amendments to chapter 601, the Town of Scarborough Transportation Ordinance, section 25, parking restrictions, locations for no through trucks over 26,001 pound signs. Again, similar item has gone through first read, public hearing. Autumn or Tom, if there's anything, any questions, I guess the council can ask. Otherwise, is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I would note that Warren and Denise Hamilton did provide a written communication to council on the matter.
Correct. And I did forward that out to everybody, so you should have received it.
Mhm.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just say at this point, I didn't say anything at first reading. I would just say tonight that I am happy to approve this for the residents who have brought forward a series of concerns about increased traffic and violations and safety concerns on Running Hill Road. I hope that this measure works to solve that problem, but I also encourage them to continue to engage with the council if it doesn't. I do have a little bit of concern that this is not going to solve the problems that they're really experiencing, but I'm willing to give this a try to hopefully alleviate some of their safety concerns, but I hope that they'll continue to give us feedback.
Councilor McGee?
Thank you. Similar, thank you, April. That was well said. Any discussion around the proposal from the resident to have the area posted with a sign that says updated ordinance in effect? Is there, I don't know what, has there been any staff discussions regarding that?
I beg your pardon,
This
Councilor. I
this
don't
came
follow your
from
question.
Denise Hamilton, was a proposal
Mhm.
to put a some sort of poster slash banner maybe out there saying there's a new ordinance in place. Please pay attention, no through trucks.
Well, the signs will be erected for the first time, so that
I think she wanted to go a step further, and I didn't know if there was any appetite to take, I don't know if she was proposing the town do it. I don't know if she was asking if she could do it. I wasn't 100% clear on it, but I didn't know if there was any discussions on it.
it's not customary. We have made no arrangements to do so. I expect we could talk to public safety and have them maybe, step up some awareness for some period of time initially.
Yes, I think Ms. Hamilton had actually agreed to produce the signs on her own accord if it would help the situation. She was just offering her services. So
Is she going to need a sign permit?
she may in
Yes.
fact.
Oh,
But
dear.
I haven't spoken to Public Works yet to see if that would be something we'd be interested in partnering with her on. So we could definitely look into it further.
Yeah, we'll take that under advisement. I mean, if there are signs that sit within right of way, we'll want to make sure that they're compliant and appropriate, as I'm sure you'd expect. But beyond that, I think we could work with our public safety teams to perhaps step up some visibility and enforcement initially. Again, as predicted, I think the dump truck companies might be the most affected, given this section of road. That word should travel fairly quickly among that small group.
That was it. Thanks.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a correction. April, you said Running Hill Road. And it's Two Rod Road. I just don't want anyone from my neighborhood going, what?
And I probably was looking right at you. That's why I said.
All right. Any other discussion? No? All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. All right, moving on to order number 23-022, first reading and refer to planning board, the proposed amendments to chapter 405, the zoning ordinance, section 2, zoning ordinance, C zoning map. And Autumn, it looks like you're gonna set this one up for us.
Yes, thank you. So last fall, there was a mapping oversight error that was corrected. And at the time, to prevent that from happening in the future, the staff, planning staff, the town clerk, GIS, zoning administrator, we worked together to create a policy document so that we would always have the right people in place when a zoning change was processed. We were requested to further that policy into an ordinance, and that is what's before you tonight is an example of what we could put into place to codify that policy and then further enhance the ordinance a bit with some administrative changes. We've included some changes that any zoning request would have to be begun at the planning department. And that way we can engage GIS in the beginning and we can make sure that the maps are created from one source and those maps will be the final source at the end as well. And so that's what's before you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I apologize for my voice. Been a little under the weather this week.
Just if I could add a couple of additional comments. This issue really rose out of I guess, an awareness of an additional oversight on the map. And I did provide a memorandum to the council back on, I believe, February 17th that indicated that staff intended to do a kind of a look back. We actually went back about 22 years, really to assure ourselves that, if it happened once, presumably it could happen again. And sure enough, I think we found 7 other instances. What is before you this evening is kind of the final result. Once the map has been updated and reflects, to the best of our knowledge and confidence, accurately reflects past council actions. The policy that this speaks to is really a process from this point forward to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So there are additional steps that I expect the council will want to consider, and I would recommend. One, and I've talked to council chair about this, is having a workshop at some point for staff to review, at the very least, the 7 instances that we've identified and talk more about the process we followed. And secondarily, I know there's been suggestions of council taking some action in the form of a resolution or other instrument regarding this matter to acknowledge it and to kind of create that fresh starting point, if you will. So I would recommend that those 2 actions occur before second reading is ever considered regarding this matter, just to align them all.
Great. Any questions for Tom or Autumn? John or Counselor Clucci?
Thank you for discovering the error last year and for putting a policy in place. I think it's a big step in the right direction. In terms of the ordinance draft that's in front of us, I'm getting a little bit confused. Maybe I'll start with our current ordinance.
Okay.
So today, we declare our official or authoritative zoning map as a document that's called the Town of Scarborough GIS zoning map. Right? And I haven't been able to locate that document. Our ordinance also requires that a printed copy of that document reside in the office of the town clerk. And there's no copy of that document in the town clerk's office. Now, this is, according to our ordinance, the authoritative source of where our zoning boundaries lie. That seems to be a problem to me, that we don't have that. And I understand changing the ordinance that kind of will take what we have online, which is close to that, and make it okay, right? Where I'm getting lost is why don't we create the map first? And then, in terms of change, I think our ordinance language is not clear. It's not perfect as is. I absolutely support looking at changes. I'd like to understand what other communities do. And did any of that, I feel like this was reactionary to a situation that came up. Do we have time to look at what other communities may be doing and understand the pros and cons of different?
Yes, and I think the idea about the resolution is that you all would have a map to act on. I can't speak to why the map wasn't online as the official zoning map in the past. I can only speak to what we can do in the future to correct it. I think that is an issue as well. Typically, you would want to be able to see that for public viewing. I know that you can get our GIS zoning map at any point, but having that as a printable copy or something to that effect should be something that is offered. And per the ordinance it is. I think that this is in line with what other communities are doing. I think we could tweak it along the way with some further discussion, certainly, to make you all feel more comfortable with it. But I think the intent is to make there be a zoning map that accurately reflects council action, and that's available online and in the town clerk's office. I put it in for purchase in the planning department, so we could actually print large ones. That's what I've done in the past for people. But that's what's proposed.
So that was going to be one of my other questions or comments, is we kind of have 3 official zoning maps according to this.
They would all be the same. They would be,
What if they're not?
but they would have to be from the same source, right? So the online source would be where we would print them, and that's where they would be printed for the town clerk's office as well. So they'd be the online GIS map with a date and a dated version, like a timestamp, if you will. And then we'd have to keep those moving forward. And with every change, I would expect our GIS administrator to produce a map that matches what was submitted with the zoning request, make sure that it accurately reflects what was approved by council. Town clerk attests to that, updates the map, changes the date as of this date. And so if you had an older map, there would always be a date on it. And so, if you have a map January 31st, then that's accurate up until that point. But if you want the latest and greatest, you contact the town clerk, you go online, or you contact my office and get a printed copy.
So I think including some of those artifacts into the ordinance language, like it will have a date, it'll have a
Okay.
timestamp. Maybe it'll have a signature by the town clerk that certifies that this was an official action, or I think including a few of those things would be helpful. But at the end of the day, you could have differences between the 3 maps here. And I'm speaking from personal experience.
Mhm.
I think the ordinance should define one as the authoritative source in the event that there is a discrepancy.
I guess if I can ask just for clarity, I'm not understanding why there would be a discrepancy between the GIS map and a paper map if they were dated. Say we started this year, just this year though, if we started fresh with this, So January 1st, we produced a map. It's available paper copy and it's online. How would we get a different one unless it was updated with the zoning
Let me tell you a
change?
story. And this is a real example.
I may be sorry I asked.
You may be. Okay. So
But no, I
I-
want to
I,
understand.
I run a business in Old Orchard, and the parcel next to me is zone DD1. That's the
Mhm.
downtown district. On the other side of that parcel is what's called amusement overlay. It's amusement park. And this is on the official zoning map. So Old Orchard actually has that document. They
Right.
have the official map. There's also some verbiage in the ordinance language in Old Orchard that says that the planning board can designate, if certain conditions are met, a parcel to be part of the amusement overlay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That happened. They did that. And I challenged it. After I challenged it, a new online version of the GIS system came up. The official map is still there. The online version shows this parcel as being designated amusement overlay, which has different rights and privileges. The official version does not show that. And, upon disputing it, the town decided that we're going to follow this unofficial version. So I'm not saying that would happen here, but it could, the way that this is set up, and it did happen in a town next door. So that's why I think having one is important. And the issue that I have with GIS being the authoritative source, I'm not saying that that couldn't happen, but I don't think as a community, we are set up for that. Our technology is not. So do you have, what kind of change procedures do you have? Do you have a test in a production environment? Who has authority to publish or to migrate that authoritative map to the production environment? And what controls are in place to assure that it happens only when the council has authorized it? Those are, so those are my hesitations with the way this is worded. The old school way is the clerk gets a copy, puts a stamp on it, tosses it on the shelf, and if there's ever a dispute, that's the one that you look at.
Okay.
And I think that there's some merit to that kind of traditional approach.
That helps me. Thank you.
Just, Counselor, to your point, I think staff is anxious and ready. And we would wholeheartedly agree that the current situation is not good. We know that there's at least 7 inconsistencies that exist on the GIS map that sits on our website tonight. At your suggestion and request, staff has held back making those changes, and but we're anxious to.
Making those changes to the online GIS system. So this is the distinction that I'm trying to draw, is that is a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways to really help inform decision-making and produce maps. That should not be the authoritative source, because it's purely at the will of somebody that's behind a keyboard who's able to work it. If there were additional controls around once that map is produced, how it migrates from that test environment to a production environment, then I think you could probably make it work, although there's still risk there. The cleanest way, and I think we're perfectly set up for this, is when a change is implemented, archive it as a PDF, which I have seen versions of that, put a stamp on it and give a copy to the clerk, and the copy that's held in the clerk's office probably should be the authoritative one, because it's less likely to change for.
I understand your concerns. And I think we're on the same page. So the online version would be the PDF static map. That would be the approved as of date. The GIS map that you can use interactively and whatnot, that wouldn't be the official zoning map. That one, I totally understand. Thank you. That's perfect.
What I'm.
That works for me. I understand that. So the paper copy and the PDF static map would be the same exact thing. We still have an online map that may be subject to other little things. There might be roads added, things of that nature, but it's not a zoning. Understood.
Yeah.
We're on the same page.
Questions? Any more questions for Autumn?
One, sorry, I have to bring it up. So one of the changes was to section G, which is actually defines how or who can propose amendments to chapter 405, which includes the map. And in section, well, one, the biggest change is that any change, even if the town council wants to make a change, has to go through the planning department. I would phrase it a little differently, I guess. Because the town council is not going to have a map showing the existing, underneath in section 4, it actually lists some artifacts that are
Mhm.
required for that request. And I don't think the council is going to have the map, or they may not have a developer in mind that, so one of the things is a statement indicating the developer has the financial ability to complete the proposed development. So this was a change from anybody other than the planning board or town council had to meet these criteria with their submission. And the change is everybody, including the town council, has to meet these criteria conditions. And I don't think they apply to all situations. So it could create some confusion.
I can clarify that for town council. You would still have a map because you would consult our town GIS and we'd get the right map and everything. But yeah, I could definitely clarify that.
I think we're actually thinking along the same. So what I was thinking is that any change that impacts the map should have a copy of how the map looks before the change, and a copy with the proposed change.
Mhm.
And then upon adoption, that proposed map goes.
And that's what
goes
you
live.
should have with all zoning changes. You should see existing and you should also see the future land use map. And you should see the transportation plan and everything else that goes along with that property. And at the end of the day, what the new will change. And then that's what would get attested to if adopted.
So I would be fully supportive of articulating some of those.
Okay, adding some
like
extra details,
requirements.
certainly.
Are there any other questions for Autumn before we go into discussion?
Just to final note, this matter was considered and reviewed by the ordinance committee and is here before you based on their recommendation.
So I want to just clarify that. This was referred to the town council. That was not a recommendation. It was simply referred to the town council. So that was the vote that was taken in ordinance committee. It was without, or it was not, neither
No
with
opinion.
or
Correct.
without. Okay,
Mm.
so just to be clear,
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, he has
Yes.
an opinion.
just double check.
So is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? If you would like to, if you could come to the podium, state your name, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Dave Rabideau, 10 Bickford Street. Won't take 3 minutes. Just a simple question. It would be regarding the 7 inconsistencies. Once those are corrected, what's the process for public notification that we just changed something that maybe you weren't aware of before? Thank you.
That's a good question.
I would say that in each instance, there was the requisite public process associated with that zone change. Beyond that, I think we ought to layer in some additional public process. I suggest a workshop. There's perhaps other ways to expose some more attention to these in particular. And I'm certainly open for that, whatever the council thinks is worthy.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All right, any discussion? Counselor McGee.
Sure, I just wanted to follow up on Councilor Calushi's and Autumn's exchange. Like, when you go to the website and you look at the zoning overlay on GIS, it's there are layers, it can be helpful. I'm not sure if you go to the other GIS though, the first thing you pop up on the parcel viewer, it's a disclaimer saying that it's intended for planning purposes only. Neither the city nor Corson GIS Solutions accept any liability for the system's completeness or accuracy. So my issue, and I think you just sorted it out, was I don't want a GIS system being the official
Right.
map of Scarborough. I think it's a tool. It's a great tool and it could be helpful. And we can even maybe expand upon it further, which is if you do the layers the right way, you might be able to pull up the council votes that shows why it changed with the document right there. And that's really a good kind of check and balance as to why the 2001 map looks different than the 2002 map. And you can go layer by layer eventually and actually document where you are. So some of that might actually be beyond there. It's a very robust tool. I just don't know if I've dissected it fully yet. But
Just Counselor, to your point, based on our research, we do have all of the council actions for the last 22 years. There's 57 or 58 of them.
Mhm.
I expect, at least with those, since we have them, we could tag them and make them as kind of background attribute information on each parcel. So someone could actually click on it, take them right back to the minutes and understand what was changed and why and when.
it just, just a thought for down the road. So I'm glad that you sorted that out because I am with you. I think the paper version is really kind of important here. When it comes to the language that we were considering, I would say that my hesitation at this stage is there seems to be like a lot of fingers in the pot. There's a lot of people that can make a change to it. Not a change, but have the ability to either update or are involved in the process of updating it. And that concerns me because that's the more people that have touches on it, the more likelihood of a human error is just kind of my take on it. So I was hoping that maybe that could be a more simplified process. Like, yes, I understand you need the tech guy to make the change on the system here. But do we really need the authority across those other departments to really implement it? So that would be just some feedback on the language that I'm seeing. And I'll reserve on comments until Mr. Hamel has a turn. I'm gonna gather myself here and a couple more thoughts.
Counselor Hamel?
Yeah, I have similar concerns to those that were raised previously. You know, mine have primarily to do with process questions. You know, I think that it's clear that we have more work to do, whether that's done live here, you know, it makes sausage making look regal. You know, it's just not a good way for us to deliberate. So I think that this is probably, well, I feel this is certainly premature. We haven't really had any extensive public review or discussion of this. We haven't really, I went through back a lot of the background material that are public records, but probably hasn't made the light of day, that included the 7 or 8 errors that were made. I tried reading them and trying to understand so something happened, what we do as a fix, and what are we doing to make sure it doesn't happen. From a process standpoint, that's still not clear in my mind. And until it is, I will feel very uncomfortable about, you know, approving something, you know, at all this evening. So, you know, that's, you know, my primary concern. The other one is just sort of public input. You know, we really, and I appreciate all of the staff work that's been done. I know that it's been very thorough and very responsive, comprehensive, but we haven't had a chance to really socialize that as a council nor as a public. And I think we really need to do that, especially in view of how much attention there is around growth and development and so forth. The final thing I'd like to say is that I just think that I appreciate Tom's suggestion about a workshop. I think that would be very helpful, but I'd be more in favor of us just tabling this and decide and referring it back to the ordinance committee, you know, for another turn, and then you know, for us to go forward from there. And we've done that many times when there needs to be. We've gone back to ordinance more than once, and it's not because, you know, we don't feel the work can be done. We're very confident, I think, in terms of the work that the ordinance committee can do. I just don't think we've done it so far.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, I would remind my fellow counselors, this is just first reading. And then it's going to planning board and whatever. There's more work to be done with this. This is the first chop at it. I think John made some good points. And I know, as someone who works with zoning maps all the time in my business, that it never dawned on me, because we get it rung into our heads that, you know, it doesn't matter what the GIS map says your boundaries are. That's not the legal definition. And I never thought about the fact that when we set zones, it's not in your deed. It doesn't say, and by the way, you're in zone X, Y, and Z or whatnot. So I think, you know, the point is to have one source map that's called the official map. And we can work as a group and through this process as to who's going to have it and where it's going to be held and what those zones are. So I don't have a problem with moving this forward tonight, so.
Counselor Seifer?
I know that the process is a little clunky, as Dawn refers to it, as, you know, watching the sausage get made, but we knew at ordinance that this had council interest. And so the recommendation to bring this to the full council, I knew exactly that this was how this was going to play out, that this was going to be council's opportunity to weigh in on the language that was proposed to us by staff. And so I think that this has been very productive. I think that the comments that have been received, I think that, you know, staff has a good understanding now of the language changes that we'd like to see, the comfort level that we all have with kind of establishing a singular map and having that be the official map that isn't the GIS map, I think I'm totally aligned with that. So I know that this isn't necessarily how we usually operate on an ordinance. If it doesn't come from ordinance with a recommendation, though, this is the public process on this. So I'm also comfortable moving this forward.
Counselor Clucci?
So normally I would be, but when we're changing chapter 405, it's a little different. So we're referring it to the planning board to hold a public hearing on the draft that's before us. And that's a statutory requirement. It's both required by our ordinance and by state law. I feel like what we're directing them to hold a public hearing on without additional work, it is a little bit premature in that I think we might be sending them in something else.
Mhm.
I would support a workshop, or sending it back to ours. I don't know. I don't have
I don't think we can approve this if we've raised issues and we've indicated things need to be revised. That would mean we're approving what's before us this evening. I don't think we can do that. Well,
Counselor,
you can, but I
Counselor Shoup, did you have anything? All right,
I just had
Counselor McGee?
a thought real quick that maybe we can have our cake and eat it too type of deal. We do have ordinance 1 week from tomorrow, which would be prior to any workshop or any, I mean, it's coming up real quick. I think the question is would we be able to see maybe a revised version in that kind of turnaround time? And can the ordinance committee take a crack at cleaning some of this up? And then maybe we're still right before a workshop or something. I just don't know if there's maybe a way that it can do a quick bounce in and out of ordinance to vet it one more time. Just a thought, that's all.
So just to my personal thoughts to weigh in on this, it seems like there's still a lot of work to be done on this one. With a lot of good insight, Counselor Clucci, that you shared. As Counselor Scyther said, I think it's great that it was brought here because I know everybody has had different levels and views on this. My personal preference at this point would be to either table this and send it back to ordinance to do the work that needs to get done. Again, with this particular one, the plan was always going to be to have an extended second read. And since we were going to extend it anyways, I think if we just delay this, allow ordinance to rework it, I would hope, Counselor Clucci, you have a lot of great ideas. I hope you would participate in that and offer
I'll come.
input. And just make sure that that happens. And I think we would still stay on schedule. And then for the workshop next week, again, it's kind of two separate things. The workshop, not next week, but on the following week would really be to get more comfortable with the changes that need to be made based on the audit and make sure we have full understanding of that. And then decide if we want to do a resolution or something, that same week. And so again, I think we would stay on time for what the original timeline was for all of this if we just were to let ordinance work through the language one more time with staff, get it right before it goes to planning board and do the typical process. So that would be my suggestion at this point to kind of keep it moving, but also allow us to have a workshop, look at the changes that need to be made, hopefully get an updated zoning map, and then move this particular suggestion forward. So I'm actually going to move that we, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, table it and defer it back to ordinance until it comes back to the council. And
Second. That was a second. I whispered that one.
Point of clarification, we don't need a date specific. There's a process that is understood.
all right, so all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Good one. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, could I just say, I do appreciate this opportunity though, because I think, I don't want to speak for April and Jim Maria, but when we received an ordinance, it was such a broad area to try to tackle, and we didn't really have quite clear concept or guidance of how the whole council felt. So that's helpful for anything that we're about to go do in ordinance. So we do appreciate this effort.
Great.
To the chair. So I just wanted to acknowledge, Mr. Roboto, that I hear your point about what notice requirements or actions. It's something that I'm trying to think through as well, because I think it's a valid point.
Primarily for people that maybe have moved into the area between the time that it was done and the time that they're being notified. So
Mhm.
kind of an awakening moment,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we have notifications now to butters, so to speak, and whatnot, so that may be, look at what we do with that
Yeah.
type of.
So I think
Written
this is-
notifications,
I think
letters that go out, whatnot.
This will be
so.
something we can address at the workshop
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, just to make sure, as we understand the impact,
Mhm.
what the appropriate public notification.
Just to be clear, the expectations, the workshop is on the 15th of March.
Mhm. Yes.
The Ides of March.
All right. So moving on, next order number is order number 23-023. Act on the request to formally accept the Parks and Facilities Master Plan as presented to the Town Council on February 1st, 2023, and direct the Community Services Advisory Board to provide recommendations on implementation by June 3rd, 2023. This is being brought forward by the Director of Community Services. Todd, did you want to set this up, or Tom, are you going to set it up?
Thank you and good evening. So this has been a year-long process, throwing through this with a lot of community input, surveys. We've got some great statistical data. I shared this document with you as a draft on January 16th for your review and consideration and feedback. And then we had our public meeting in February. And a goal of mine and my department was always to try to get this approved so we can start the work with our advisory board, which is I'm really happy with the makeup of our board right now and some of the initiatives and some of the makeup things that they're trying to do. And so they're looking at their goals and priorities. And we've had 2 meetings where we sat down and kind of gone through this to kind of how it works, where things are. And so, again, this is a roadmap for us, and all the choices that come through here need to be approved and suggested by the community, by the council, by boards. And so this just is really a summary of everything and all the work that the surveys and the focus groups have all put something down forever for us to say, okay, here are the things that people in town want. We've gotten cost estimates, and then the work really begins for us to say, how do they fit? What do they fit? Maybe some of this doesn't. These are all public suggestion and feedback. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to dig into this as a working document, knowing that we have all the checks and balances and processes in place, and community input. If all of a sudden a council decides that, okay, project A is it and project A affects Blue Point, then you start your process. Community meetings, output, how does it affect? So just because this plan gets accepted this evening, the work is really starting for us, you know, as a staff and as a council and the board. So and then working with our newly formed and expanded advisory board. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? No? Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? Nobody online? All right. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
I had a clarification. Is there a deadline that you guys wanted to report back? I thought there was, but now I'm not seeing it.
June 7th.
June
Okay,
7th.
so I think Todd and I had talked that maybe that might be a little bit too soon, because I know the March meeting, we are going to be focusing on the budget. And so we do want this to be on the agenda. We don't know how long the budget. And so I just didn't know if maybe that deadline could be pushed a little, or if there was some wiggle room with it. And I'm sure Todd, if you haven't.
Yeah, the one good thing about this new advisory board is they're presetting their agendas and they're being very thoughtful and deliberate with their action. And so our next meeting is already deliberated on budget presentation from me, kind of what initiatives are. And so we could contribute time in April and May. I just want to make sure we come back with direct deliverables and where, because, you know, back to you. So I would be okay, and after Karen and I spoke, I'd be okay with June 7th as long as if we're not in that ability, we can come back to you and say, we need a little more time. I mean, I'd like to keep us to the pace, but knowing that depending on what we dig into, we may have to come back and say, we have to talk about this. We need to work. We know, what do we need to do? So again, I'm not opposed to the 7th as long as we have flexibility once we dig into it. That works.
Yeah.
Counselor Cucci?
In your dream world, where would this logically fit? 2 meetings sounds aggressive to come up with a recommendation on it.
Well, and again, I guess my question to council is when you say recommendations, this is a 5 to 10 year implementation piece. And so my thing is that it's going to take us some time to go through kind of, we've spent 2 meetings, kind of how it works. And we've kind of spent some time with the document. A lot of things kind of have to fall into place where if we, let's say this project was recommended, then it would put some natural timelines to some of these other things. Because we have, I said this before when we did the workshop or the presentation from Barry Dunn, is that, this is not only about planning for growth, this is about dealing with the growth that's already happened. And so some of these things, we have to work with the public groups about how do we move and what do we do, and designated funding for design. And that's part of the budget process that Tom and I have had discussion on is, if you want a fully vetted plan. So I guess really we need to dive into the recommendation piece, because we're not going to be able to come back in 3 months to give you a full 5-year plan of a timeline with funding and all that sort of stuff. We've got estimates from these guys. And so I think we can look at high level, maybe where some pockets are. I've said this before, our staff is already trying to tackle a lot of these things. We're looking at 80 issues this spring. We've got some recommendations in the budget. We're looking at some of the deficiencies. So they've identified them, and we've been looking at them for years. So it's not like as they've said them to us, we've been trying to work on them and plan for them. So I think my staff has a good jump on some of this. Now let's start to look at the priorities, and then how do we categorize them, and then what funds are designated and when. And when does that fit in the overall town plan?
Counselor Hamel?
We had a lot of discussion one-on-one about this, and the wording of adopt versus accept and that sort of thing. And I was reminded that this doesn't mean we're going to, we're just appropriating the whole thing, the whole $19 million plan to span, a decade or so. So it's a great piece of work, well done, really thorough. We've just begun to understand what it means, and I think it makes a lot of sense for that to be the domain of the committee, and for us to kind of move through it step by step, subject to other procedural review and appropriations and to prioritization. So, I think we need to begin, and it's a logical next step. And I agree, might need a little more time with that first report back.
Counselor McGee?
Sure. I kind of want to better understand, as we refer to this as a Parks and Facilities Master Plan, what are the implications of adopting it or quote unquote accepting it? Is this going to be used such as the comprehensive plan currently is used, which is every time we turn around, we were told this aligns with the comprehensive plan, this aligns. So are we going to be hearing this aligns with the Parks and Facilities Master Plan? You already accepted it and in its entirety. And the reason I'm a little hesitant here is there's parts of that plan that, show basketball courts down the line. Well, 5 years from now, we might find out pickleball is all the rage and nobody wants to play basketball anymore. Are we now going to be like, well, we can't put pickleball courts in there because it doesn't align with our Parks and Facilities Master Plan? Am I going to hear that at any point in time? What does accepting this really formally mean for us as a council? That's what I'm driving at. Is this the plan for the town? This is what it's all going to look like.
I would certainly say it's not analogous to a comprehensive plan that carries a whole different level of weight and magnitude. This plan, what gave rise to this plan is late in the budget process discussion last year around a fairly sizable investment request and some concern around, is that the right one? Are there other priorities? And I think correctly, the council, I think it was Councilor Anderson at the time, said, let's put a pause. Let's not fund any major project, and let's kind of get our arms around this thing. And that's what this document is. It really starts to look at the full scope of what our needs and our opportunities are, frankly. I don't think it commits this council or any future council. All of those individual funding decisions are unique to themselves and will be the subject of discussion and future action by future councils.
So you would classify this more of as a tool for guidance of future facilities and planning for the, I want to understand what it means that I'm accepting this. That's what I'm driving at, is what am I accepting?
I think one of the things to note that this plan didn't necessarily dictate or contemplate much around a community center, right? So what I envision is, as the ad hoc community center advances and as those discussions happen, that's going to have an impact to this plan and priorities. Again, not knowing exactly what that is, assuming we have a community center that has fields, maybe some of these renovations in this plan are obsolete or unnecessary because now we have a different thing that's into the mix. And so I personally view this as a guiding document, especially for the committee to leverage to do the work that the committee's authorized to do, which is to help guide facilities planning and decision-making for our parks with the council. So as Todd said, I think this gives a comprehensive view of all the potential opportunities. And now it's up to the committee to kind of work with town staff to ultimately continue to refine, prioritize, figure out what's really the top priorities that they would want to propose to the council for the council to act in future budget years. So again, I've always seen this in any other plan we do like this, like the transportation master plan that we talked about earlier. That's again a guide to planning, but the plan is just the beginning. And then once we have it, it's going to be an iterative process to revisit. I shared with both Councilor Shoup and Councilor Hamel, which kind of prompted the suggestion to defer it back to the committee. Some work that other communities do where they have their boards like ours every 5 years have a strategic plan that they're kind of revisiting the master plan and saying, what do we want to do now? What do we want to do now? So again, this just kind of serves as that backdrop to ask that question, near term, what do we want to do? And again, things are going to change. The community center, again, I think wherever that goes in the next couple of years will, in my opinion, ultimately impact decisions that will need to be made around this plan as well.
This is a working document. That's what this is. And to Tom's point earlier about, an elementary school, what comes with that? How does this affect? What changes? What private institutes gets built in town that takes a load off of some of our capacity issues? So this is a working document, but what this does, at least puts the wishes of the community in a cumulative one place where we can start putting some things together and then adjust it. And again, our board has talked about providing an annual report, kind of checks and balance. What have we done? What have we accomplished? That type of thing. So they're really starting to think that way as a metric for themselves more.
Just a final point for your consideration. I made reference to it earlier. This plan is detailed and sufficient enough, we believe, to support the institution imposition of a recreation fee. And that alone, I think, and I think the council needs to take some action to give it at least recognition. The way this is worded is probably about the lowest bar that you could be asked to consider. But I think that alone is reason that we ought to get this moving so we can move forward and in that arena.
One thing I'd like to ask, there's one slide in there that I found pretty helpful, and it refers to the analysis that you do in terms of the funding from fees and that sort of thing. So I would hope that you would include that, the committee includes that when they come back and speak to that in terms of what the first year impact would be.
Yeah, that was one of the things when I looked at it that I found most interesting is there seems to be a willingness by the community to adjust fees, which is great. Even though Todd, it seems like you're doing like better than every other town in terms of managing your costs and covering your costs. So kudos to you and your team for really making sure that we're charging the right things to cover our costs. But again, like how those impact fees can also in the future help offset some of these, but also some of these items, I would question, do they go in the CIP or do they go in the operating budget? Because some of them are so small. So I think that's going to be a good thing for the committee to kind of explore and say, how do we optimize these different funding sources to make sure that we're optimizing them as best we can? And I think the impact fees are going to be a critical part of that. So I agree, being able to have that fee stood up, collecting cash so that way we can actually fund some of these projects would be a great thing to have.
Well, and the nice way we've broken out our budget over the last 2 years is that it states that the Parks Division is the one that's being subsidized by the town, and that is 99% of the action here. When you look at everything on the other side of the ledger, the other 5 divisions, we're supported 110%. So when we talk about impact fees and use of the school and outside groups, those are community good decisions, and how we fund them and how fast we fund them are choices we'll have to make. On the fee side of the house, we're completely self-sufficient. So this is really where this Parks Master Plan will allow us to really invest in those type of investments, not only what we have, but what we need. So
I just have one request for you, Todd, and the advisory board. So as you guys go forward and start prioritizing things, I'd really like to see parkour be prioritized so that the council can do a team building parkour activity. So
I'd like to see on the skate park. We can
Yeah,
start
we
right there.
we could do something there.
I'm sure we have boards and helmets and, yes, exactly.
All right.
Workers'
I was
comp-
writing that down,
workers' comp
actually.
Insurance does not
Roller
extend
ball.
to that- to those activities.
I started to write it down, so.
All right, any other discussion items or questions for Todd? Counselor Clucci?
I don't actually remember if this is on the floor yet, but
Oh, it's not, oops.
maybe we should do that. first.
Yeah. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Okay.
There we go.
Good job, Todd. And kudos to the chair. I do recall him suggesting that we take a pause on some projects, maybe last year, and fund this study. And I think it provides a roadmap. It's not definitive, but what it does do is it allows you to tee up projects or slate them, give them some definition, and to the extent that growth will impact them, then you can charge fees again, to that growth. So I think the timing worked out perfectly that we're able to do this now and hopefully get the recreation feedback and or implemented sooner rather than later. So thank you all for the work, and it's a really good product.
Thank you. Counselor Seifer?
So I think that to me, this is the next logical step in this process. We as a council supported the commissioning of this report, and we had a presentation. I know it was a little bit shorter than this is what was necessarily planned originally, but we've all had the document now for, several weeks. And I think that this is our way of showing the committees that are going to interact with this document, whether it's specifically rec advisory. This is also going to have finance committee implications. And so as to not put our finance committee in the same position that we were in last year, where we had to kind of question, oh, is this the right time? Is this the right ask? Now we have a supporting document to go by. And so to me, that's exactly what this is. It's a roadmap for our committees to do work and make good recommendations. And so I'm in favor of supporting this tonight too.
Any other comments? No? All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, next up is order number 23-024, act on the request from the police chief to accept the donation from Bank of America Charitable Gift Fund on behalf of the Robert and Joan Carpenter Tricoli in the amount of $1,000. Tom or Tody, is there anything you guys would like to set up on this one?
You remember you had a request similar to this at the last meeting, and this is the second from these here.
If I can find out if there's any, why there's a second one from the same family, I can't answer, but I'm now curious, and I'll find out. If I do, I'll pass that on.
Great. Any discussion? Or sorry, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No, all those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Item 9 is non-action items. We have no non-action items today. Item 10 is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. Is there anybody who would like to give an update? Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, I met with the senior advisory group yesterday. I was finally able to meet with them because they meet during the work day, but that's all right. And I'm going to be working with them to talk to people who have been on the group, haven't been active, find out what's going on. We're kind of going to regroup and reconstitute and see, what's what. So I'm just warning Karen that there'll be something coming down probably with ANC and whatever at some point, once we figure out, who's who and what's what.
Yeah, is
So
Todd the liaison for that as well? Todd Souza?
he wasn't at the
Okay, because I
meeting,
feel
so
like we've discussed previously at the Community
What's that?
Services and Rec Advisory Board,
Cindy's
that
the,
there wasn't a lot of activity with that board and possible consolidation or
yeah, they
something
don't
like
want to
that.
consolidate and I don't want to do that.
Yep.
Unless we have to.
Uh-oh.
They've been kind of, part of what's going on, just so people will know, is that a lot of elders really aren't, unlike the rest of us, they aren't on their computers, they aren't using, so when the pandemic came, it all fell apart for them. So I'd like to give them a chance to see if they want to reconstitute, become more active and whatnot. So that's where we're at. That's all I want to let you guys know.
Any other committee updates? Counselor Clucci?
We're going to have a finance committee meeting next week. I suspect the overwhelming focus will be on fund balance. The finance director is going to have a presentation. There's some nuances in a lot of different classifications of fund balance. So I think it'll be educational. And then we'll actually look at some historical numbers as well. We do have a couple of things that we'll be considering for action. One is a rescinding order for some outstanding and no longer needed bond authorizations. And the other is just taking a look at our the projects that we've approved over the past 15 years and getting a little bit of an update on them. And this is more of a precursor to, at some point in the future, we're going to be asked to issue bonds again. And just trying to get a head start on that process and helping us understand what's in the queue and where are we at and what's going to be needed, what should be coming before us. So that's next Wednesday at 5.
Counselor Scyther?
Communications is meeting next Thursday at 3 o'clock. I will be looking for volunteers to write our April 1st and April 15th Counselor Corner articles. So if you have an idea for an article that you'd like to submit or you haven't written anything in a while, let me know and I will bring that to the full committee. Otherwise, we'll discuss it as a committee and I'll give you a call and let you know you were chosen. As a reminder, I've invited the school board communications chair to join us to briefly discuss the budget communications timeline and whether or not we want to work, do something jointly with the school board. In the past, we've done some budget communication jointly with them. And we can also discuss any upcoming school joint ventures at that time. So she will be joining us. I think that's it for communications, other than to just remind everybody that tomorrow night is our Counselor Corner Live. Nick and John will be discussing the GMO revisions. And so if you're interested in discussing the GMO, that's tomorrow night at the Public Safety Building at 6 o'clock.
Counselor McGee?
Sure. As alluded to earlier, we have ordinance next Thursday at 4 o'clock, right after the communications meeting. So if you're in for a double header, it's a good one to sit in for. And you also may have heard, we'll be talking about some zoning ordinances. We have just so you know, the working group, as Liam pointed out earlier, is still in progress. So we expect to hear back from them a couple months-ish, month or two. As far as the library goes, I believe Tom mentioned this last time in his update, but my last meeting happened the night before our town council meeting. But Nancy Rodway, of course, is retiring with a target date of September. So that's kind of big news on that front. The library is currently kind of working through their post-loss tour. And I think the question remains on their end, where do we go from here? And I think that's still is something they're trying to absorb and define and figure out. I think there was some suggestions made that perhaps working with community services more closely and seeing how the ad hoc community center group comes out might have an impact on where they are and where they sit in this process. So we'll continue to work through that. And then SEDCO, there wasn't a whole lot for an update. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't recall anything necessarily worth quote unquote reporting back on. No, yeah. And I think that's it for my committees for now. And GMO, I'll let you handle.
Okay.
Chairman.
So for GMO, again, we're doing the Counselor Corner tomorrow, and then we're going to circle back together to revisit the feedback that we heard from the council and the public, and then try and get something back out both to the developers and to the committees to do a second pass. Again, if there's other ideas that the council has had since, again, we're still open to making suggestions and changes. We'll probably get that revision to you guys as well so that you can kind of take a look at it and digest it. Again, our goal is to have something in the packet by March 31st, I guess, to make sure that it's in there for April 5th. So again, if there's anything that comes top of mind or anything you hear from the public as it relates to this and want to relay that back to Nick and I, just let us know. I think that's really it on the GMO front. We did have the school building meeting yesterday. Again, they spent a lot of time talking about their approach for the business case. Councilor Hamel and I got a sneak peek of that with the board chair and some of the other members to kind of get a good sense of what they were planning to do. And so again, for everybody who's interested in understanding what we're going to get with that business case, I would just refer you to watch the meeting and kind of understand what type of data inputs, how they're organizing it, just to make sure that it's meeting everyone's needs. And if there's any feedback, feel free to let Counselor Scyther and I know, and we can relay that back to the school board and the school committee. I don't think I have anything else. I think, Counselor McGee?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about transportation, which was
Yep.
last night. And they did talk about some pretty big items in town. One, the traffic impact fee study, which is discussion about Payne Road maybe taken separately from the townwide, just because that unto itself, with budget constraints and the scope and size of maybe the Payne Road side of it. Tom alluded to it earlier in his update. And then an interesting discussion around Higas Parkway, as far as future planning for what that road will look like, and if it can be made quote unquote kind of complete streets-esque, as far as pedestrian walkways and access. Bill Bray was on hand, which I don't know if any of you know, the traffic engineer that the town has used on a number of occasions over the decades. So he was helpful, kind of gave us kind of outline what our limitations on Higas are because of the designation it currently carries from the state of Maine, as the type of highway it is. So that will be kind of forthcoming too as they go through their planning. I think it's interesting. And then during counselor comments, I'll comment further on some of my takeaways. Thank you.
All right, any other updates, committee updates? All right, next item is item 11, council member comments.
You're all waiting on me. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
So I know, wasn't much of a cliffhanger though. Get right back to me. I'm just gonna, so having sat through all the, so that I thought the transportation meeting last night was quite eye-opening. It seemed to be some consensus that we're just behind the 8 ball. And there's no other way to say it, like the traffic improvements that need to be made in town just haven't kept up with the pace of development, which is causing dissatisfaction with the way we transport ourselves around town, whether it's pedestrian access or whatever it might be. We're just behind. And so you pair that with the moratorium, quote unquote moratorium, we're hearing about the sludge that we can't even deal with waste. You know, we have capacity, right? But we don't have anywhere to put it. You just take it all together, and I just sit there and I keep asking myself, like, are we really in a position to welcome a quicker pace of growth in town? And the more and more meetings because that's always been the rub, right? Can we absorb the development? Can we absorb it? Can we make sure that our community services don't suffer? So I hate to like pontificate at this, but I guess this is the section of the agenda where I can. This is right where I can. Just all of these meetings, it just keeps coming back to like, wow, what are we really doing here? Like, do we really need to take a deep breath? And I am not at all proposing a moratorium. The more of these meetings and realize how much more work there is to do in this community to accommodate what we have and what's coming, it's staggering. There's a lot of work to be done. So just food for thought as we go through our GMO process. That's all I'll say.
Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I would echo many of the things that Councilor McGee just said. I think that, every year we make big plans, and this year we have pretty ambitious list of goals, and I think we're making good headway on them. But then there's the inevitable stuff that comes in over the transom, and this development today, the other environmental issues that we've had so far this year, I think are just a wake up call that we're at a different phase in terms of our ability to absorb growth, and also measure the benefits of growth. I mean, we've constantly trumpeted how much it's worth to us, these various TIFs and CEAs, and we still have not really done a full accounting of what the actual benefits are in dollars and cents to the town. We still have not been able to portray that. Our partners at the Downs are very good at that. They're astute at that. They operate under, in the private enterprise world, but we really need to be able to do that. And especially as we're going to be evaluating things that are this is going to be a headbanger of a budget cycle. I have a feeling in terms of what's been queuing up. So I just, hopefully we can maintain focus and, a good level of public involvement and discourse, even though they're difficult issues. And reasonable level of, of cooperation, I think that we're displaying as a council. So I'm looking forward to relying on those things.
Counselor Katarina?
I don't know if you guys have seen it, 9:56 this morning, I sent you a really good article from the Business Insider about how us boomers, there's two of us sitting here, have caused real problems that now, guess what, they're catching up with us. So anyway, just read the article if you haven't. Okay, boomer.
Any other councilor comments? No? All right, next item up is adjournment. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.